This is the last system. It has three components, which is your blood, your heart, and the blood vessels and circulation. So this is going to be a little bit longer than the other reviews we had. The cardiovascular system is the transport system of your body, comprises of your blood, heart, and blood vessels. So here are the functions. Of course, it transports nutrients, of course, your hormones. Napag-usapan pa lang natin yung endocrine system. So removes waste products, gaseous exchange, immunity, immunity kasi nga nagpabakuna tayo ng di ba, ng COVID o ini-inject siya. Pumapasok yan sa bloodstream. At pinapump ng heart mo yung blood na meron ng antigens of COVID all throughout your body. So, nagiging immunized ka na. Blood vessels transport blood, carries oxygen and carbon dioxide, also carries nutrients and waste, and it pumps blood through the blood vessels. So, blood vessels, and then your heart. Those are the components of your cardiovascular system. Okay, so blood muna tayo. Blood is a connective tissue in fluid form. So this is called the fluid of life. It carries oxygen from lungs to all parts of the body and carbon dioxide from all parts of the body to the lungs. So binabalik niya yung deoxygenated blood, yung wala ng oxygen, carbon dioxide na lang ang meron, papunta sa lungs para humingi ulit ng oxygen doon. Fluid of growth. It carries nutritive substances from the digestive system and hormones from endocrine gland to all tissues. It is also the fluid of health. It protects the body against diseases and gets rid of unwanted substances by transporting them into excretory organs like our kidney. So blood is thicker than water, of course, a very common quote. 8% of your total body weight is your blood. Blood volume is 70 ml per kilogram of body weight. So for example, if you are 50 kilograms, that's 70 ml times 50. Okay, so more or less 5 to 6 liters in males and 4 to 5 liters in females. So kaya pag ikaw ay na-aksidente at nagkaroon ka ng sugat, malaking sugat, or na-hit ang isang vein, ayan, ikaw talaga ay makaka-experience ng blood loss, ora-orada, dahil konti lang ang dugo natin. Tingnan nyo naman, 5 liters lang, 6 liters lang. Alright, the blood temperature is about or nearly 38 degrees Celsius, and the pH is basic. It's 7.35 to 7.45. That's basic. That is not acidic. For blood composition, we have blood plasma, plasma proteins, the fibrinogen, and your serum. And we have the formed elements of the blood. We have the red blood cells, your platelets, and your white blood cells, which has 5 other cells, the monocytes, lymphocytes, eosinophil, basophil, and neutrophil. Okay, so for the red blood cells, it consists mainly of hemoglobin, a complex metalloprotein containing heme groups whose iron atoms temporarily bind to oxygen molecules in the lungs and release them throughout the body. So, ang hemoglobin, siya ang nagdadala talaga ng oxygen content ng blood. So, doon siya sa red blood cells. Oxygen can easily diffuse through the red blood cell membrane. Red blood cells are responsible for transporting oxygen from your lungs to your body tissues. Your tissues produce energy with the oxygen and release a waste identified as carbon dioxide. Your red blood cells take the carbon dioxide waste to your lungs for you to exhale. Okay, so these are the facts about the red blood cells. Here. They are either called erythrocytes. Lifespan is about 120 days for your red blood cells. So, nagre-replenish siya. Then we have platelets. Platelets contain dense granules, lambda granules, and alpha granules. Activated platelets secrete the contents of these granules through their canalicular systems to the exterior granules containing ADP or ATP, calcium, or serotonin. So, itong platelets or the thrombocytes as we call it are small, colorless cell fragments in our blood that form clots and stop or prevent bleeding. So, your platelets are made in your bone marrow. Diba? We have the red marrow, yellow marrow, and then your platelets. Okay, so the lifespan naman of your platelet is 8 to 12 days. Ayan. It seals the wound and prevent blood loss. It helps repair damaged vessels. So the normal number of platelets is 150,000 to 400,000 per microliter of blood. So pag nagpapakuha tayo ng CBC platelet, ayan, pwedeng isama nyo yung platelet, CBC, complete blood count and platelet. Ang platelet, yan talagang pinagbabasehan pag ang pasyente ay merong dengue. So if the patient is already experiencing bleeding, so may dugo na lumalabas sa tenga, sa ilong, ibig sabihin kulang na talaga ang platelet niya. Kasi wala na siyang clotting factor. Ang platelet ay ang ating blood clotting factor. Okay, so we have the white blood cells. White blood cells are a part of your immune system that protects your body from infection. These cells circulate through your bloodstream and tissues to respond to injury or illness. So again, your red blood cell carries oxygen and nutrients towards body parts and body organs. Ayan. Ang platelet is involved in preventing blood loss because it has a clotting factor. So nakakapag-prevent siya ng pagdudugo. Pag ikaw ay nagkakaroon ng sugat, nag-heal siya mag-isa dahil meron kang clotting factor. Then we have the white blood cells, which is part of your immune system that protects your body from infection. So yan, these are the 5 different types: neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, lymphocytes, monocytes. The lifespan of WBC is 24 hours to several years. It fights disease and foreign invaders because it is the primary cells of your immune system. It is formed in the bone marrow and some in the lymph glands. It is the largest sized blood cell. So your red blood cells are called erythrocytes. Your platelets are your thrombocytes, and your white blood cells are your leukocytes. Okay? Okay, so these are the descriptions of the different white blood cells. You have here the monocyte. You have the lymphocytes, which has T cells and B cells. And the eosinophils, which regulates inflammation. Then we have basophils. So it plays a part in immune surveillance. It helps detect and destroy some early cancer cells. So very powerful din ang white blood cells, di ba? Neutrophils are important effector cells in the innate arm of the immune system. So it is a constant patrol. So siya ang nagpapatrol kung may mga microbial infections ka, at merong mga pathogens na kailangang patayin. Ang neutrophil ang gumagawa niyan. Okay, what is hematopoiesis? Hemato, or your blood. And then poiesis is making. The making of blood. All the formed elements of blood are derived from a single population of cells called the stem cells. Blood cells need certain nutrients to form properly. So, kailangan ng iron. Di ba, pinapainom yan? Yung mga sabi, anemic ka, o uminom ka ng iron, uminom ka ng folic acid, vitamin B complex. Ayan. Para maging healthy ang blood cells mo. Ayan, o. Okay. When blood vessels are damaged yan ha, sorry. Ayan. Blood can leak into other tissues and interfere with normal tissue function, or blood can be lost from the body. So these are the mechanisms of preventing blood loss. So para hindi ka mawala ng dugo, nangyayari itong tatlo. So itong platelet plug formation, more or less, na-explain ko na siya kanina, di ba? Here. So for vascular spasm, immediate but temporary constriction results when smooth muscle within the wall of the vessel contracts. Close vessels completely. So, para hindi na siya magdugo, yung blood vessels mo, meron siyang capability na mag-spasm or mag-constrict. Sasara niya yung daanan ng dugo para hindi na lumabas yung dugo, hindi ka magkaroon ng blood loss. Then, platelet plug formation, or the accumulation of platelets that can seal up or cover up a small break in the blood. Blood clotting. When a blood vessel is severely damaged, blood clotting or coagulation results in the formation of a clot. O ano naman yung clot? A clot is a network of thread-like protein fibers called fibrin that traps blood cells and fluid. Healthy naman ang clot, pero pag ang clot ay nandoon sa brain, pwede ka magkaroon ng stroke. Kunyari, nagkaroon ng blood clot ang brain mo, nauntog ka, or let's say may pumutok na ugat, ayan, delikado siya kasi pwede siyang makabara. Pwedeng mabara yung blood flow papunta sa utak mo. Or hindi lang sa utak, or any other parts of your body. Okay, control of clot formation. Without control, clotting would spread from the point of its initiation throughout the blood vessels. Okay, anticoagulants prevents clotting factors from forming clots under normal conditions. Yan, kung healed naman na or okay na, enough na yung clot na na-produce para hindi ka mag-bleed, o dapat mag-stop na yung clotting. So, meron tayong anticoagulants para hindi na mag-proceed yung clot formation. Then we have thrombus formation. When platelets encounter damages or diseased areas of blood vessels or heart walls, an attached clot forms. So that is your thrombus formation. Emboli is a thrombus that breaks loose and begins to flow through the circulation. Can block the circulation and can lead to death. Ito siya, ang thrombus formation, kunyari may nangyari sa blood vessel mo, nagkaroon siya ng thrombus. Ang emboli naman ay isang thrombus. Ang emboli ay isang thrombus na nakawala. Nakawala siya. Sumama na siya sa blood flow mo. Oh. Ang blood vessels mo, paiba-iba yan ng diameter. For example, may maluwag na diameter, may masikip na diameter. Paano kung yung emboli na yan or yung thrombus na yan, napunta siya doon sa masikip na daanan. So, maglalag siya doon. Maiipit siya doon. Pati ang blood flow, hindi na makakadaan kasi nandyan na siya, nakabara na. Yan ang emboli. That's how dangerous an emboli is. Okay. Blood grouping. We have transfusion. Transfer of blood or blood components from one individual to another. Siyempre, pag ikaw ay nangangailangan ng dugo, magkakaroon tayo ng transfusion. Infusion is the introduction of fluid other than blood such as saline, glucose solution into the blood. Ang infusion naman ay, ang example nito ay pag ikaw ay na-dextrose. So, nilalagyan ka ng ibang substance. Nilalagyan ka ng ibang substance. Ang katawan mo ay nangangailangan ng ibang substance. Hindi lang blood. Transfusion reaction. So, clumping or rupture of blood cells and clotting within blood vessels. So, pag nag-transfusion tayo, kaya tayo nagkakaroon ng cross-matching. Parang, ini-examine muna yung dugo kung talagang compatible siya sa'yo. So, kaya nga meron tayong different blood types, di ba? Merong AB positive, AB negative, type O, ayan. Pag hindi naging compatible yan, magkakaroon ng transfusion reactions. Yung antigen mo at yung antibodies mo, titigas or magkla-clump. Ang term na ginagamit natin dyan ay agglutination. Okay? Hemolysis. Hemolysis is the rupture of red blood cells. It causes severe damage to kidneys and it can cause death. So we have the ABO blood group. This is the system to categorize blood. Yan. So for the RH blood group, just kindly read this one para maintindihan nyo kung ano ang RH incompatibility. Okay, diagnostic blood tests. Earlier, I have mentioned about cross-matching. So, we have blood typing, cross-matching para walang agglutination or hindi mag-clumping yung blood cells mo at yung blood cells ng ibang tao na ipinapasa sa'yo. Then, we have the CBC. For the red blood cell count, we have the hemoglobin and hematocrit. So, white blood cells, kailangan makount yung 5, yung neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils. Okay, so lahat ng yun. Yan, and differential white blood count, so percentage of each of the 5 kinds of WBCs, diba, 5, I have just mentioned that. And the clotting, so we have platelet count, prothrombin time measurement, or yung clotting time mo, ilang seconds ba bago ka mag-form ng clot. And blood chemistry. Okay, the heart. Our heart beats 100,000 times a day, pushing 5,000 gallons of blood through our body every 24 hours. Kadami. It delivers oxygen and nutrient-rich blood to our tissues and carries away waste. Okay, so it is located on the superior surface of the diaphragm. left of the midline. So, left side siya ha. Hindi talaga siya nasa midline ng katawan natin. Anterior to the vertebral column, ibig sabihin, nauuna siya or nasa harap siya ng spinal cord mo at posterior to the sternum. Ibig sabihin naman, nasa likod or nasa unahan niya yung sternum at nasa likod siya ng thoracic cage mo. Okay, so we have 4 chambers. The atriums or the atria, the 2 upper chambers, and the ventricles are the 2 lower chambers. So atria receive blood and ventricles discharge blood or releases blood. The left atria and the left ventricle are separated from the right atria and the right ventricle by a wall of muscle called your septum. The walls of the heart consist of the epicardium, myocardium, and the endocardium. These layers are covered in thin protective coating called your pericardium. The 4 main functions of the heart: pumping oxygenated blood to the other body parts, pumping hormones, receiving deoxygenated blood, and maintaining blood pressure. Okay, so this is the gross anatomy of your heart. So we have here the right atrium, the right ventricle, the left atrium, and the left ventricle. So this is the biggest veins, the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, and the largest artery is your aorta. There. So this, the pericardium is the outer covering. This one, parang meron siyang casing. Yan, and then here, surface of the heart. And this is how actually the heart looks like. So we have there the valves, the bicuspid and the tricuspid. So the mitral valve is not shown in there. Okay, so each heart valve has 2 important functions. So to open correctly so that the blood can empty the chamber. So from, for example, the right atrium, so o-open siya dito para bumaba yung blood sa right ventricle. Okay, and then your valves are to close properly also so that blood cannot flow the wrong way. So, ko-close siya para hindi bumalik. Okay? The valves, right? So we have here the 4 different valves: the aortic valve, mitral valve, pulmonary valve, and the tricuspid valve. Okay, most people are familiar with the sound of a human heartbeat. We call the sound as lub-dub. Lub is the sound produced with the tricuspid and mitral valves are closing. And the dub is caused by the closing of the pulmonary and aortic valves. When heart valves fail to open and close correctly, the damage to the heart can be serious. The harm can affect the heart's ability to pump blood through the body. So, meron tayong different conditions involving the valves of your heart. First is regurgitation. So, ang regurgitation, it is a leaky valve. So, hindi lahat ng dugo na ipupush niya papunta sa ventricles, may naiiwan. Kasi hindi siya nag-fully close. So, that is regurgitation. May naiiwan pa, nag-flow backward kasi hindi siya nagko-close ng fully. Stenosis naman is a narrowed valve. So, imbes na wide ang opening sana ng isang valve para lahat ng dugo makapass through it to the ventricle, konti lang ang nakakapass through kasi nga constricted siya or masikip siya, narrowed valve. That's stenosis. Then we have atresia. This means that the valve opening doesn't develop normally during childhood. This prevents blood from passing from an atria to a ventricle or from a ventricle to the pulmonary artery or aorta. Yan. So the blood must find another route. So sometimes, yun ang sinasabi nating shunting or sinashunt. Dinadirect siya into another area of the body. The heart's electrical system. So to pump blood throughout the body, the muscles of the heart must be coordinated perfectly, squeezing the blood in the right direction at the right time at the right pressure. The heart's activity is coordinated by electrical impulses. So the impulse that begins the contraction of the heart is the sinoatrial node, or the heart's pacemaker. It is positioned at the top of the right atrium. This signal causes the atria to contract, pushing blood down into the ventricles. So kailangan ng electrical or polarization dito para magkaroon ng muscle contraction. Di ba nga kanina, I have told you about the polarization, depolarization of the muscle, yung resting membrane potential. Ito na yun, parang ganito na din siya. So, ang heart mo, di ba, pag nag-stop siya, para kang ine-electrocute, ang tawag doon ay defibrillation, di ba? Yung I'm clear, you're clear, everybody clear, and then kinukuryente yung pasyente para ma-restart ang kanyang electrical system. So mag-pump ulit siya. Ayan. The electrical impulse travels to an area of cells at the bottom of the right atrium called the atrioventricular node. These cells act as a gate. They slow down the signal They slow the signal down so that the atria and ventricles do not contract at the same time. From here, the signal is carried along the special fibers called the Purkinje fibers. So una muna, the charge or the electricity goes to the sinoatrial node, then to the atrioventricular node, then it is carried along the special fibers called the Purkinje fibers within the ventricle walls. They pass the impulse to the heart muscle, causing the ventricles to contract. Okay? The cardiac cycle. So, for the cardiac cycle, dito na nangyayari ang systole at diastole. The period of time that begins with contraction of the atria and ends with ventricular relaxation is known as your cardiac cycle. The period of contraction is your systole, and the period of relaxation is your diastole, or systole and diastole. Both the atria and ventricles undergo systole and diastole, and it is essential that these components be carefully regulated and coordinated to ensure blood is pumped efficiently to your body. Okay, so these are the phases of your cardiac cycle. Of course, because your heart pumps the blood through contraction, your atriums should contract and your ventricles should also contract. So the atrial and ventricular systole first, and then followed by the atrial diastole and ventricular diastole. Okay, so this is how the phases of the cardiac cycle looks like. So first is dito muna, atrial systole, then atrial diastole, and then balik na naman yan, atrial diastole. So ventricular diastole, and ventricular systole. So sa ECG, eto na nakikita mo. Yan ang mini-measure niya, yung systole and diastole. Control of cardiac cycle, we have intrinsic and extrinsic controls. So the heart functions in response to a combination of factors both within the heart muscles itself and outside the cardiovascular system. So for intrinsic control, automaticity. Ibig sabihin automaticity, automatic na kasi talaga siya na nagpapump. And the heart contracts as a unit, and there is a long refractory period. For action potential and pacemaker cells, this actually happens. So just read through this. Kasi ito na naman ang mga calcium, potassium. So earlier na-explain ko na yan, yung depolarization, polarization. Yan, autonomic nervous system. So that is an extrinsic na. Kasi nasa labas na siya ng heart. Brain na ito, di ba? ANS. Okay, so your heart pumps because your brain actually also has something to do with it. During times of physical or emotional stress, of course, your heart rate is affected by your physical and emotional stress. And when the stress is over or during depression. We also have other extrinsic controls. We have piezoreceptors that detect blood pressure, your hormones, your age, depende kung nag-exercise ka ba, at saka sa level ng exercise mo, kung extreme ba, kung sakto lang, and then body temperature. Okay, here's the baroreceptor reflex. I don't know if you already understand this based on the illustrations that are shown in your book. But let me try to explain this to you in an easier manner. Okay, so the baroreflex is one of the body's homeostatic mechanisms that helps to maintain blood pressure at nearly constant levels. Ganito siya. So, for example, if there is a decrease in arterial blood pressure, nagkakaroon ng baroreceptor stimulation. So, nagkakaroon din siya ng iba-ibang mga output. As to your, here, in your book, ganito siya. For example, this is for baroreceptor reflex ha. If your blood pressure is increased, your baroreceptors in your carotid arteries, in your heart ba, at saka in your brain, they are being stimulated. So what happens is, the SA node and the cardiac muscle decrease its activity. Dahil nag-i-increase ang blood pressure mo, hihina ang iyong heart rate and stroke volume. Okay, so hinihinaan niya ang pag-pump para hindi gaano maging mataas ang iyong blood pressure. Therefore, nagkakaroon ng blood pressure decrease. Okay? Kung ikaw naman ay nagkakaroon ng mababang BP, meron kang low BP, blood pressure decreases, ang baroreceptor mo rin ay nag-i-stimulate or nai-stimulate dito sa heart at sa brain mo. And then, your body's reaction is nag-i-increase ang heart rate mo dito at stroke volume. So, binibilisan naman niya ngayon ang pag-pump ng blood kasi low blood pressure ka dito. Oh. Kung low blood pressure, ibig sabihin mahina ang pagdaloy ng dugo mo sa buong katawan mo. So, bibilisan ng heart mo, bilisan natin para mabilis ang blood flow. Kasi low blood. O, pag high blood, ay hinaan natin ang pag-pump ng heart para hindi gaanong mag-increase ang blood pressure. Okay? Yun ang baroreceptor reflex. Pangalawa, meron tayong chemoreceptor reflex. The chemoreceptor reflex regulates respiration, cardiac output, and regional blood flow, ensuring that proper amounts of oxygen are delivered to the brain. So, ganito ay itsura niya. Ang chemoreceptors naman ay, ang concern niya dito ay blood pH. Okay, look at here. If you observe, a homeostasis is also the maintenance of blood pH or the carbon dioxide content in your body. It's either you are alkaline or basic or acidic. So our blood pH is only 7.35 to 7.45 pH yan ha. Ang pH natin ay 0 to 14. So pag 14 na, basic na siya. Pag 0 siya, 1 to acidic siya. Okay, so ang sabi dito, pag nag-increase ang blood pH, your chemoreceptors in the medulla oblongata detect an increase in blood pH. So this is often caused kung meron kang konti na lang ang carbon dioxide sa katawan mo. So ang nangyayari, nagdi-decrease ng activity ang heart rate at stroke volume. Okay? Para ma-maintain ang blood pH mo. On the other hand, kung ang blood pH mo ay konti lang, ibig sabihin, ikaw ay acidic. So dito, ang nangyayari, ikaw ay basic or mas alkaline ka. Ang katawan mo mas alkaline. Konti na lang ang carbon dioxide. Dito, marami kang carbon dioxide kaya acidic ka. Ang mangyayari, mag-i-increase ng heart rate at stroke volume ang heart mo para ma-maintain ang blood pH. Okay? Summary, ganito siya. For example, there is blood loss. So, the blood loss is the example for this situation. So, in blood loss, both arterial blood gases like oxygen and your carbon dioxide, diba? Kanina for chemoreceptors, carbon dioxide ang pinag-uusapan. And then, dito naman, arterial pressure. Kasi pressure naman or blood pressure naman ang pinag-uusapan sa baroreceptor reflex. So, merong decreased arterial pressure na a-activate ang baroreceptor reflex at eto, naaapektuhan ang cardiac system mo. Nagbabasoconstriction, ang flow ng blood mo, yung volume na nailalabas ng blood mo. ng heart mo. So, ayan. So, for arterial blood gases, na-affect, syempre, pag nag-blood loss ka, magkukulang ka na ng oxygen, magkukulang ka ng carbon dioxide. Your chemoreceptor reflex is activated, and at the same time, the same as the baroreceptor reflex, it regulates your heart rate and your stroke volume, your vasoconstriction, and all the things that happens in your heart. Okay, so now we go to blood vessels. Okay, here is the general feature of blood vessel structure. So we have the arteries, arterioles, capillaries, and the venules. So this is the structure of arteries, veins, and capillaries. So this is your vein. So it's much wider than your artery. So this is the passageway of your artery, and this is your capillary. So there, in between, dito nagkakaroon ng exchange of gases. So sa artery, oxygenated blood, and then it goes to the capillary bed. Doon na sa dugo mo na yan, sa cells na talaga, and then nadi-diffuse siya, nagiging deoxygenated blood, pumupunta na sa vein, papunta na ulit siya sa heart. Okay? Ayan, so these are the structures. We have the tunica intima, tunica media, the tunica adventitia. So they are the layers of the blood vessel. They are the artery wall. Okay. Okay, let's go to arteries. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. Pulmonary arteries transport blood that has a low oxygen content from the right ventricle to the lungs. Kasi ang pulmonary arteries, papunta siya sa lungs. Hihingi siya doon sa lungs ng oxygen. Systemic arteries transport oxygenated blood from the left ventricle to the body tissues. Okay. Types of arteries. We have elastic arteries, the muscular arteries, so just read through the descriptions later. And then we have capillaries. Capillaries are the smallest and most numerous of blood vessels, form the connection between the vessels that carry blood away from the heart and the vessels that return blood to the veins. So, kanina pinakita ko sa inyo, ito yun eh. Ayan. So, from the heart and then to the heart. So, this is oxygenated and this is deoxygenated. Okay, the primary function of capillaries is the exchange of materials between the blood and tissue cells. Capillary distribution varies with the metabolic activity of the body tissues. So this is your artery. Ang mas maliit na mga arteries are called arterioles. Dito naman sa gitna, ito na yung capillaries. Mas maliit pa ang capillaries kaysa sa arterioles. O, artery muna, then arterioles, then your capillaries. Ito na siya. This happens in the tissue cells na. Sa tissue cells, doon na sila nag-e-exchange ng nutrients, ng mga vitamins, kung ano-ano ang dala ng dugo mo. And then, also the oxygen, of course. And then after that, ang capillaries, connected na siya sa venule. Ito na yung venule. Ang venule ay maliliit na mga vein. So your vein now carries the deoxygenated blood back to your heart para mapump siya ulit papunta sa lungs mo. Humihingi na naman ng oxygen sa lungs. Okay, what do capillaries do? In the small intestines, it receives digested nutrients. The endocrine glands, it picks up hormones. In the kidneys, removal of nitrogenous waste. So we have continuous capillaries, fenestrated capillaries, and discontinuous capillaries. Okay, veins. Veins carry blood toward the heart. After blood passes through the capillaries, it enters the smallest veins called venules. The venules, it flows into the progressively larger and larger veins until it reaches the heart. In the pulmonary circuit, the pulmonary veins transport blood from the lungs to the left atrium of the heart. This blood has a high oxygen content because it has just been oxygenated in the lungs. Systemic veins transport blood from the body tissue to the right atrium. This blood has a reduced oxygen content because the oxygen has been used for metabolic activities in the tissues. Okay, so these are the clinically significant veins. Let us review your blood flow. So might as well memorize this. Just a tip, this is included in our exam, ha? So this is your blood flow. Let's start from the veins. So ang veins, yan ang nagdadala ng deoxygenated blood. Kunyari, tapos na, ginamit na ng tissues mo, body organs mo, yung oxygen na dala ng arteries. O arteries, arterioles, di ba? So, from the arteries, it goes to the arterioles, then it goes to the venules, then it goes to the veins. So, from the veins, your blood goes to the inferior vena cava and superior vena cava. One moment. Okay, so as I was saying earlier, let's start from the veins. Okay, so here, the veins. So from the veins, it goes to the inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava. These are the biggest veins in your body. So here, the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. So babalik siya dyan. Yung deoxygenated blood mo, papasok siya ulit sa heart mo through the inferior vena cava and superior vena cava. It enters the right atrium, goes through the tricuspid valve, ito, and goes through the right ventricle. So pagpasok niya dito, papunta siyang pulmonary artery. Bakit? Hihingi siya ng oxygen sa lungs. Okay? So from the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, it goes to the right atrium. Then, it goes through the tricuspid valve. Dadaan siya dito sa valve. Mapupunta na dito yung dugo sa right ventricle. And then, it goes out to the pulmonary artery para humingi ng oxygen sa lungs. Pagkagaling sa lungs, papasok na ulit. So, galing na tayo sa lungs ha. Humingi na tayo ng oxygen sa lungs. Papasok na ulit tayo dito sa pulmonary vein. Ang pulmonary vein, the pulmonary vein is the only vein that carries oxygenated blood. Di ba nga, ang vein, deoxygenated blood na ang dinadala niya? But, an exemption is the pulmonary vein. Why? The pulmonary vein is the passageway of the oxygenated blood from the lungs, kasi humingi ka ng oxygen sa lungs, di ba? So, from the right ventricle, lalabas sa pulmonary artery, pupunta sa lungs, hihingi ng oxygen, papasok ulit sa pulmonary vein. Pagkapasok sa pulmonary vein, punta ka na sa left atrium. So, pagpasok sa left atrium, dadaan sa mitral valve, and then bababa sa left ventricle. So you will pass through there, left ventricle, and then after you go to the left ventricle, you go to the aortic valve. So mitral valve ito, from left atrium is mitral valve. The blood goes to the left ventricle and goes to the aorta. Pagpuntang aorta, syempre dadaan na naman siya ng isang valve, yun ang aortic valve. Okay, so left atrium, mitral valve, left ventricle, it goes to the aorta, and then it goes to the arteries na. So arteries, and then arterioles, and then venules, and then veins. So from veins, papasok na naman. Veins goes to the inferior vena cava and superior vena cava. Okay, so that's your blood flow. Okay, let's repeat. So from veins, it goes to the inferior vena cava and superior vena cava, goes to the right atrium, goes to the tricuspid valve, goes to the right ventricle, goes to the pulmonary valve, goes to the pulmonary artery, goes to the lungs, enters the heart through the pulmonary vein. From pulmonary vein, it goes to the left atrium. And then, it goes through the mitral valve, itong valve. It goes to the left ventricle and goes to the aortic valve, goes to the aorta, and then to the arteries. So, arteries, the smaller arteries are arterioles, the smaller veins are venules, and then veins. And then go back to the heart. Okay? Alright, so as much as tired as you are, I am also very, very tired. I hope everyone will be able to see the importance of anatomy and physiology, and God bless your exams, guys. This is your foundation, so work hard on it. Okay, I will pray for you. See you on Monday.